Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Okay. The other thing I want to add just to my bio as well, I've just been added as an adjunct faculty for the University of Nebraska at Kearney, so I'm kind of wearing a couple different hats, like all good museum-related duties that we all have. So, my talk today is going to specifically talk about the Mormon Trail through Buffalo County. And when Mr. Bennett had came to us earlier this year, I knew just enough about the Mormon Trail to be dangerous. But then when Mr. Bennett comes knocking at my door, I'm like, okay, I need to learn a little bit more about what we've got here in Kearney and Buffalo County. And it's a darn good thing that I further investigated this because that's a big part of the Mormon Trail. So looking at our roadmap, we're going to be talking specifically about, again, the Mormon Trail through Buffalo County and a couple of different stories in Buffalo County. So we're going to be highlighting the Oliver and Nutter families today. And then BCHS has done a lot of programming and a few events around the Mormon Trail this year to help celebrate the 175th. So you'll see some of those pictures as well. Okay, so when we're talking about the Mormon Trail through Buffalo County, as you can see here, you've got Omaha on your far right side, and then Kearney or Buffalo County on your far left side, and following the Platte River. And this map is coming from the Mormon Pioneer Trail Foundation. And so as they inch closer and closer to Kearney, that is where they are going to find that maybe we consider crossing the Platte River. This is also where they're going to have their first buffalo hunt. This is also going to be a site of Wood River Center, which is going to be a huge community, or a community center for folks that are traveling along the trail to restock on some items and then continue on west. So Wood River Center is serving as what like Fort Kearney would have for Oregon Trail travelers. Okay. And I'm also proud to say, you see that building that's on the far right side in this first left picture? That's our Family History Center. Okay. And 11th Street, which was the original Mormon Trail, goes right in front of it. So if you grab one of those little rack cards from the back on that table, you'll see we heavily publicize that in our marketing campaigns. So, and we've got a couple buildings that are affiliated with the Mormon Trail on our property, which I'll talk about here. So I risked life and death by standing out on 11th Street. As you can see, it's a 4-lane road. It's on the way to the high school, so it's got all those high school drivers as well. But yeah, 11th Street is the original Mormon Trail. And in that far right image, you can see the museum when it was first started in 1975 and how much that area has grown just in Kearney alone. So, all this information that I'm pulling from is going to either be from the Mormon Trail Foundation or our own archives. And so to really express how important Buffalo County was along the Mormon Trail is through this quote here that I'll read. So, near present day Kearney, Nebraska, the Saints began to parallel the Oregon Trail, which starting at Independence, Missouri, reached the Platte at this point in the mid 1840s. The south side of the river was the favored route, but earlier travelers had followed the north bank. The Latter-day Saints nearly always keeping on the north side. Actually, we're using an older branch of the Oregon Trail. Just west of Kearney, the Saints first sighted and hunted buffalo. And so that is from the Mormon Trail Foundation in 1979. And again, that first buffalo hunt is going to be a big key in how folks perceive the rest of the way going out west. From our Buffalo Tales, I have Sarah Oliver's story and Edward Oliver's story as well. And so if you haven't heard of our Buffalo Tales, it's our bi-monthly publication that we put out on through our, it's like a newsletter. and it's going back as far as 1978. So this is one of our early ones. And so how we tell the Sarah Oliver story is with every single guest that comes in and takes a tour at our facility. And again, we have a little village at Trails and Rails Museum, and we have a schoolhouse. And so Edward and Sarah, they're coming from England, Manchester. And so they're one of those folks that cross the Atlantic and then they get on the Mormon Trail that way. So they have a much longer journey in many respects. And so once they get to Buffalo County, they realize that this is quite the journey. And in fact, in July of 1860, they have a couple incidents that hinder their progress across Nebraska. So the first time, they have a wagon wheel break. And then the second time, they have the axle of that wagon wheel break. And they're coming through, they go through Wood River Center. And so 4 miles after they had just fixed their wheel of their wagon, the axle breaks. And Sarah, the strong, independent woman that she was, had told her husband, I am not walking another mile or step across this territory of Nebraska. Well, that didn't sit over very well with Edward. And Edward, as the family, the Oliver family that stayed in Buffalo County, had taken with the nanny and continued on west, while Sarah and the children stayed behind. And so Sarah, where Shelton is now in eastern Buffalo County, she goes on and remarries and helps found this schoolhouse that we have on property today. It's District Number 1 and is the first schoolhouse teacher in 1871. So a really interesting story about how the staybacks or the comebacks along the Mormon Trail, where we have the Oliver family, that it's a whole different kind of situation. The trail, I want to emphasize, it's long, it's tedious, there's people struggling to survive the whole way, but then there's also people that firmly implant just in places along the way. Okay? And as you can see here from this map, it's going to be a little difficult to see until you realize, okay, right here, Shelton, or what would have been Wood River Center, where the Olivers would have gone through. Here, we've got Gibbon. And then further west, it's not on the map, but it would have been right here, would have been Kearney. And so what we have here is the military roads that's going to be going south across the Platte here, as you see. So we've got the whole Platte River here. And then Fort Kearney it's going to be somewhere down in this neighborhood. So, and again, the program does a really good job in saying, we always say Mormon Trail. It's actually Mormon trails. It's not just this one little path. It's actually these sequence of trails. It's moving, it's actively breathing. There's folks that are taking different routes based on every single year. Okay? And so this is our District Number 1 schoolhouse at the Trails and Rails Museum. Her husband that she ends up marrying, Joseph, he's kind of one of the board of directors that first sees over District Number 1, and that didn't mean they didn't have education in Buffalo County before then. It just meant that they were in sod houses or in people's homes before, but when we talk about this schoolhouse, we talk about the fact that, again, it was the first frame schoolhouse, but they also had the Methodist church that met in there every once in a while, and then also the Buffalo County Commissioners had several meetings in there. So 1871, that predates Kearney by 2 years. This is a large structure and it's protected. This is a sought after building to have meetings and services. And then we've got the Nutters. And how I talk about the Nutters for today's program is through our From Beyond the Grave program. And this is something that's brand new with the Buffalo County Historical Society. It's kind of our version of cemetery tours that we do, but we're highlighting only a few folks at their graves as they impersonate who they were. And last year we did this program in Gibbon, or at the Riverside Cemetery. And so the Nutters who were buried there, they came along the Mormon Trail, and they were one of those folks that came back. So they went out to Utah and came back and ultimately decided that this is going to be where they're going to plant their lives and start growing crops. The folks that are right there, just by the grave, by the Nutter graves, that's Linda and Ken Schaefer. They're involved with our hospital in Kearney, and they just had a hoot of a presentation. I tell you what, and some of the stories that they had to share. In fact, one of them, when we had talked about earlier in some of the panels yesterday, there were always that fear and threat of Indians coming after these travelers, or even settlers for that matter, leading up to the 1870s, 80s as well. And so Mr. Nutter had received word late in the middle of the night that there was an Indian raid party that was coming through, and they were sweeping across the plains. They were burning down houses. They were scalping people, the whole 9 yards that they would have heard. So just like any other frenzy that would have thrown communities into, they abruptly grab all their things. They move east to get away from the danger. Well, they forgot something. They forgot the baby. The baby was, while they were immediately putting things onto a cart and going east, they had put the baby in a dresser drawer. And so that baby must have been awfully quiet in the midst of all of this panic. And so they had gotten maybe about 5 miles before they realized that they had forgotten their youngest child. So I believe Mr. Nutter had the opportunity to go back and fetch their child and then continue on the rest of the way. And so these Indian scares, as they called them, were pretty common at that time, even in Buffalo County, even though you have the Pawnee that are going to be relocated really kind of by the 1860s and before folks really get out there. But that still didn't mean that those frenzies or those kind of scares were still a threat. Okay? And that was just one way that we even highlighted bringing local history to life. And this was circumstantial that we highlighted a couple folks from the Mormon Trail. Then we get to, if you wanted to watch the William and Dinah story, I encourage you to go to our Facebook page. It's one word, Buffalo County Historical Society. And you can see that great image of our logo. We've got some kids walking out of our main building there on 710 West 11th Street. And the video that you'll want to find, it starts kind of as right there on that road with some people that we had asked to help. So if you're interested, and you can see it's about an hour and a half long, but you can speed through it, and it was a great program. And we had upwards of about 300 people that weekend. We did it on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So that's kind of how we had highlighted some of these folks. Additionally, with the 175th anniversary of the Mormon Trail, we have our annual Wagons West celebration. So back in June, earlier this year, we partnered with the LDS Church in making this a bigger deal. So that way the general public in Kearney knew about what was the big deal with 2022 and the 175th. So we had some awesome folks. Mr. Bennett came in and did a presentation for several folks. He had also done some presentations in the gazebo that we had on the museum property. We also had some hand carts walking around, and as you can see, dad and son helping move their daughters across our Trails and Rails property there. And so a great event that highlights the 175th anniversary of that Mormon trail through Nebraska. And I do want to back up real quick and talk about Okay, and so with some of these Mormon trails coming through Buffalo County, it's important to remember that, you know, we have all these folks that are coming through this specific area. They're interacting just not only with themselves, but everyone else that's going on around them. We have various road ranches that are coming through the area. They're talking to people, they're continuing on their way, they're not isolated in their own little bubble, if you will. And so with that, you know, I will kind of hold off on some questions until after we have our next presenters. So thank you.